Welcome back, everyone, to the Boiling Point Podcast. We are back with a regular episode now in the middle of our Olympic coverage. Episode 56, The Ancient Astronaut Theory and the Coming Deception. We have with us our senior unexplained phenomena correspondent, Uncle Mark. Please make sure you like. We both would like you to like, comment, share this episode out if you enjoy it. That's going to be the best way to help us grow. If you would like to help us further than that, please visit our storefront at bonfire.com/store/The Boiling Point Podcast, all in lowercase letters. To find our storefront, buy yourself a t-shirt, a sweatshirt. We have beanie hats. Not really this time for it, but we also have baseball hats, women's clothes as well. So please check that out. We have a very extensive storefront. Uncle Mark just placed his order for his podcast t-shirt tonight, so he'll be on within the next couple of weeks with his own t-shirt.
Yeah.
Uncle Mark, welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to in person. Finally,
yes,
we get you in person on the podcast.
Yeah, at last. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Not remotely. It's good to finally have you here.
We're here in the flesh.
Yes. I mean, we'll have you any remotely or intergalactically, however it takes, whatever it takes. But it's good to have you here now for this episode. It'll make the conversation, I think, a little bit better.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about ancient aliens.
That's right. The ancient alien theory, the ancient astronaut theory.
Oh, the ancient astronaut theory. I'm sorry. I'm already saying
ancient aliens. It's the same difference. We're going to look at it a little bit. We're going to investigate it. We're going to see what archaeology has discovered for us. We're going to look at the Cuneiform Tablets that they base their theory on, and we're going to see just what it's really about. We're going to see what the Anunnaki were, who they really were. We're going to do a lot of different things here in this podcast. So we're going to look a little bit at Zecharia Sitchin and his Earth Chronicles, Eric von Däniken and his Chariot of the Gods. And, does this have merit? Is it real? Or is it all, a bunch of fantasy? So we're going to look at that a little bit in detail. And that's what our broadcast is going to be about today. So stay tuned, guys. You're going to enjoy this.
Yes, sounds like a nice full episode. It's good. And it'll be a great one to have you here and not have to do remotely.
Yes,
with the audio issues that we deal with sometimes. So.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
And we'll have pictures for you, of course. With Uncle Mark, there's always pictures. So
yes.
they'll look for them, or you can listen. This is the great thing about the Boiling Point Podcast. You can listen to it, or you can watch it. With Uncle Mark, it's always best to watch it because he usually has visual aids.
Yeah, well, Zecharia Sitchin did a series of books, and he claimed the Anunnaki were those who came from heaven, that they manipulated the DNA of what's now modern humanity and created us. Now, first of all, I think we need to look at this historically, logically, what the actual Cuneiform Tablets say, and then we'll reach our conclusion. So I'm going to start with the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki, they're pivotal, and they're the first and foremost in his theory, okay? Who were these beings, So I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what they are and what they espouse.
All right, that sounds good.
Now, this is from Ancient Origins, okay? And what he's basically saying is the modern era has witnessed an incredible surge in the popularity of all forms of media concerning the mythology of the ancient Mesopotamians. Fueling this ever-growing trend are the writings of a number of researchers who propose connections between several Sumerian myth cycles and the theory that the human race was engineered or created by a group of extraterrestrial beings. Known as the ancient astronaut theory, this field is largely reliant upon the translations of cuneiform tablets supposedly made by Zecharia Sitchin, whose series of Earth Chronicles books form the foundation upon which this modern church of the alien gods has been built. That pretty well sums things up, okay? According to Sitchin's narrative, the Anunnaki, they're a group of mystical beings whom he claimed crossed their own DNA with that of Homo erectus in order to create mankind, for the purpose of using humans as slaves to mine gold and other minerals. Today, these Anunnaki are often portrayed as an equivalent of the Old Testament creator God, In other words, they're trying to take the place of God with these alien beings that they're calling the Anunnaki. So, who are the Anunnaki, okay? What does the cuneiform corpus actually say about the Anunnaki and the other mystic beings? How does the version of these beings and their activities presented in the ancient astronaut media compare with how they were truly represented in the ancient world? That's what we're going to look at today, and that's what we're going to find out.
Yeah.
Now, okay, to begin with, Anunnaki translates to princely blood or seed of Anu, not those who came down or those who came from heaven to earth. So, first of all, where he got that, he made it up, okay, basically. There's no basis of fact or foundation for that translation. But anyway, what it means is either princely blood or seed of Anu. Now, many of these modern sources claim the Anunnaki are the Sumerian deities of the old primordial time, and that's correct. They had a pantheon of gods who were the children of the sky god Anu and his sister Ki. Significantly, some scholars have come to realize that the Anunnaki should be more appropriately considered demigods or semi-divine beings. Who does that remind you of? We'll get to that in a second.
All right.
Apparently, Anu's sister Ki was not originally considered a deity and was only described the status of a goddess much later in the history of the myth cycle. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of these deities on one of these seals. This is Inanna, Utu, and Enki. Okay, that's what they look like. They have funny pyramidal hats and other odd clothing. I'm not sure what the hats represent, but they were a sight to see, I'm sure. Anyway, that's from a cylinder seal dating back 2300 BC. Now,
so what are we looking at on that picture there?
Well, they're the Sumerian gods. They're three of the pictorials of Sumerian deities: Inanna, Utu, and Enki.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, William Clauser, okay, was a Sumerian author and expert on it, and what he says is, some authorities question whether Ki was regarded as a deity since there is no evidence of a cult and the name appears only in a limited number of Sumerian creation texts. Samuel Noah Kramer identifies Ki with the Sumerian mother goddess Ninhursag and claims that they were originally the same figure. She later developed into the Babylonian and Akkadian goddess Antu, consort of the god Anu. So essentially, this would mean the Anunnaki were born of a union between a sky god and a mortal female, who was later deified in mystic traditions. Now, what does that remind you of? Gee, the Nephilim, you know, the same people that we talked about in the other broadcast. We're back to the Watcher Angels and Nephilim again, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And our other podcast that we did before this, we went into the Nephilim in great detail. So if you didn't see it, you ought to go back and find that. And anyway, furthermore, Ki is a Sumerian sign for Earth.
That is, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you for a second. That is episode 43, everybody. You should go back, and if you want to watch that, that's where we talk about the Nephilim. And I believe you're going to be referencing a few things from episode 47, Portals and Gateways.
Yeah.
So you should go watch episodes 43. It's a two-parter. Episode 43 and episode 47. Those are going to be episodes that we're probably referencing a couple times during this episode.
Yep. So anyway, this Ki is a Sumerian sign for Earth, okay, for one thing. Anu's consort is sometimes considered personification of the Earth itself. Now, that's similar to the biblical tradition where mortals were created out of the dust of the earth, you know. It said that in Genesis 2:7 that we were created out of the dust of the earth. So that's sort of similar to that, okay?
And of course, now we're referencing other episodes, ones with Pastor Gavin, probably episode 45, episode 43, episode 42. You should just go watch all the episode 40s before you watch this episode right now.
A lot of these tie together.
They really do.
Yes. So, you know, the concept of a group of half-divine beings born of mortal women, that's very similar to the biblical and extra-biblical tradition of the Nephilim, you know?
Yeah.
So, where were the Anunnaki? Where did they live? You know, well, scholars have found profound similarities between the mythologies of the Anunnaki and the Nephilim. In 1971, Edward Lipinski published a scholarly analysis of several ancient texts, including the Old Babylonian version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, all which feature important details revealing the true location of the sanctuary of the Anunnaki in the ancient Eastern thought and cosmology. Lipinski found that, in fact, the Old Babylonian version of the Gilgamesh epic identifies Hermon and Lebanon with the dwelling of the Anunnaki. So, Mount Hermon and Lebanon are where all these ancient places give the sanctuary and location of where the Anunnaki lived.
Okay.
He emphasized in lines 12 to 21 of the Old Babylon Gilgamesh, which tells of the destruction of Humbaba, the guardian of the abode of the gods, at the hands of Gilgamesh's companion Enkidu, which is an odd name, Enkidu. It reminds me of a song, Enkidu. Anyway, I do that. Anyway, the text says that after this companion Enkidu, the two penetrated into the forest, opened the secret dwellings of the Anunnaki. While later mythologies suggest alternate locations for the home of the Anunnaki, Lipinski explains that the oldest Mesopotamian and Near Eastern Canaanite texts point to the cedar forest of Mount Hermon. Now, what else do we know about Mount Hermon from our other podcast? Mount Hermon is where the sons of God came down. Actually, the book of Enoch tells us that they landed on Mount Hermon. And Mount Hermon is where all their activities originated from. So here we have another tie to the Nephilim and Mount Hermon again. Now, Lipsky says, traces of the older tradition can be found in the mention of the mountain which was the abode of the gods, and whose access were hidden by the cedar forest, whose guardian was Humbaba. This mountain was, we believe, the anti-Lebanon Hermon. The southern range of the anti-Lebanon is therefore likely to be the mountain in whose recesses the Anunnaki dwelled, according to the Old Babylonian version of the Gilgamesh epic. In the Old Babylonian period, the Anunnaki were still the gods in general. Mount Hermon should thus be identified with the dwelling of the gods. So we've got Mount Hermon again and the Nephilim, the same tie-in that we have with our Nephilim that we talked about in our earlier podcast. Lipinski also points out the fact that Mount Hermon was considered the guardian of international treaties in the ancient world, and connects this tradition with the oath sworn by the Watchers in Enoch 1. They all got together. They said, well, you're saying you're, to mate with these women and produce a hybrid race and all, and we're afraid, you're not going to go through with this, and we're going to do it, and you're going to stick us with it. So they did a treaty up there, and it's interesting that they did it on Mount Hermon, is where they made their pact, because according to the ancient world, that's where they did all their international treaties. So that's another tie-in. So anyway, it connects with the oath sworn by the Watchers in First Enoch. So incorporating the apocryphal texts such as the Testament of the 12 Patriots and First Enoch into his study, Lipsky concludes, Mount Hermon is a cosmic mountain which joins the earth with the lowest heaven. The same conception lies behind the episode of the sons of God in the book of Enoch. The celestial beings gather on the summit of Mount Hermon because this is the mountain of the gods, the Canaanite Olympus. Okay, so where's Mount Hermon? We're talking all about it. Where is it, okay? It's located at the southern end of the Anna-Lebanon mountain range, straddling the borders of Syria and Lebanon. Now, does that make sense why the military is so interested in Syria and Lebanon? Maybe. We know they walked away with lots of artifacts and things out of that area. Anyway, I'm digressing. Hermon's highest peak reaches 9,232 feet. The area abounds with ancient altars going back millennia, and was still the host of shrines and rituals as recently as the time of Constantine the Great. Of further significance is the fact that Gilgamesh was renowned in the ancient world for obtaining knowledge from the pre-flood or antediluvian world, as stated by the Ugarit at Gilgamesh, lines 5 to 9, which it says, he explored everywhere the seats of power. He knew the totality of wisdom about all things. He who traveled the distant road to Uttarnaptashi, who crossed the ocean, the wide sea, as far as the sunrise, he brought back tidings from the antediluvian age. Now, Gilgamesh was Nimrod, okay, in the Bible. He was called many different things, but when we're talking Gilgamesh, we're talking about Nimrod.
Okay, which we've talked about in other episodes and with Pastor Gavin as well.
We tied Nimrod in on several of our podcasts and talked about him quite a bit on one of them. So, anyway, these passages bring us full circle with Lipsky's interpretation of the Old Babylonian version of the Gilgamesh epic, where the ancient king journeyed to Mount Hermon, the abode of the Anunnaki. So, basically, we're back to the Watcher Angels and the Nephilim again. That's for the Anunnaki. And again, okay, just to kind of, I guess just to kind of review. I'm going to just kind of repoint things out again. Central to the ancient astronaut theory and author Zachariah Sitchin's narrative is a group of mystic beings known as the Anunnaki, whom he claimed crossed their own DNA with that of Homo erectus in order to create mankind, for the purpose of using humans as slaves to mine gold and other minerals. Today, these Anunnaki are often portrayed as the equivalent of the Old Testament creator God. But what does the cuneiform corpus actually say about the Anunnaki and other mystic beings? How does the version of these beings and their activities presented in ancient astronaut media compare with how they're truly represented in the ancient world? That's what we're going to look at a little bit. Now here's a picture of Nimrod / Gilgamesh. And he's holding a lion in his hand right there. That's off a statue that made to him 35,000 BC roughly. That's rough guess. They don't know for sure. But anyway, that's Gilgamesh. That's Nimrod. Now, we're going to talk about the Anunnaki a little bit in more detail. We talked about who basically they might have been, how they're basically Nephilim half-breeds, and where they live. So now let's see what the other surrounding cultures and things in Mesopotamia say about the Anunnaki.
Okay.
Still another factor connecting the Anunnaki with the story of the Watchers and their offspring is their status as underworld beings. In Mesopotamian cycles, the Anunnaki are frequently depicted as fates or judges of the dead who occupy the subterranean realm or function as spirits of the earth. Now, what happened to those that died? That's exactly what happened to the Nephilim that died, isn't it? The same description was given to them as these Anunnaki.
Yeah.
So we're finding Watchers' offspring and the Anunnaki to be extremely similar. So, in tablets discovered at Nippur from around 2000 BC, the Anunnaki are the 7 judges, underworld entities that accompany Eshkirgal, the queen of the subterranean realm. When Ishtar descends and is brought before the assembly, they fasten their eyes of death upon her, causing her to perish. So, I have an ancient Hittite relief carving from Yazakiah, a sanctuary of Hattusa, depicting 12 gods of the underworld, whom the Hittites identified as the Mesopotamian Anunnaki. Okay, so that's a picture of what the Anunnaki looked like, according to the Canaanites. All right, so we're going to talk about a little bit more about what the ancient texts, the Cuneiform Tablets, and what they say about the Anunnaki, okay? Contrary to much of the popular literature and the other media today, the evidence recorded by the academic research of scholars and a comparative study of the actual cuneiform and other ancient texts indicate that the true identity of the Anunnaki is to be found in the Eastern tradition of a group of half-gods, spawned by crossbreeding between divine beings and mortal females at Mount Hermon in the Anti-Lebanon mountain range. Gee, that's exactly the same description as our Nephilim, isn't it?
Yeah.
These beings are often associated with knowledge from the world before the flood and the Great Deluge, and were later assigned roles in the underworld. This would suggest that rather than making the Anunnaki the equivalent of the Elohim who created man in the book of Genesis, they should more properly be compared to the Nephilim and the fallen angels described in Genesis chapter 1, 1 Enoch, and the other biblical texts that we looked at and talked about. Central to Zachariah Sitchin's narratives are a group of alien beings known as the Anunnaki, whom he claimed crossed their DNA with the Homo erectus to create mankind, to use them as slaves to mine gold, okay, and other minerals, okay. What he said is Nibiru, who had a 3,600-year elliptical orbit around the sun, came around toward our planet every 3,600 years. Their atmosphere was fracturing, and to keep and maintain and sustain their atmosphere, they were spraying gold particles into the atmosphere to retain the heat of the planet and the moisture in the planet. So that's a synopsis of what he claimed that these tablets and everything was telling us. But
okay.
Today, these Anunnaki, they're often portrayed in the ancient astronaut theory literature as the scientific equivalent of the creator of the human race, as portrayed in numerous religions. We know that Anunnaki actually means princely seed or princely royal blood. Sitchin's translation of Anunnaki as those who from heaven came is itself an error or was completely fabricated, one of the two.
Yeah.
Okay. And all the modern translations of the term in this fashion are merely relying on Sitchin's own publications. Scholars are free to search the entire spectrum of Sumerian literature at the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature on the internet. You can go in there and you can see every bit of this, okay?
Yeah.
You can test any of these terms that are referenced by Sitchin or Von Daniken or any of them guys, okay? So, in the wake of the popular reception of Sitchin's books, a plethora of popular media have followed this lead in claiming the Sumerian literature portrays the Anunnaki as a group of alien beings who descend to the earth in flying vehicles, in spacesuits, or other paraphernalia, right? There's no such depiction of the Anunnaki in the Sumerian text, period. Okay? In fact, the closest match to these portrayals is a description of the Anunnaki. And they're gods or deities who Anu conceived in the sky. Okay, that's the closest you can get to them. The Anunnaki are never depicted as alien space gods in Sumerian art or iconography. And those symbols which Sitchin's legacy has led many to believe represent them actually refer to other deities. For instance, the winged discs and the crescents which proliferate so much Sumerian iconography. What's the word I want there?
I do not know.
Iconography. It's anyway.
Iconography.
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 Anyway, they actually represent specific solar and lunar deities, not the Anunnaki. So, there's our first problem with his subject. Next, okay, let's go with the gold digger things, okay?
Okay.
Regarding the subject of ancient divinities mining gold, it may surprise you to learn that Sitchin himself never provided a textual reference from the Sumerian corpus to support this theory, which has gained incredible popularity. He never provided a text for it, okay? So he basically made it up.
Sitchin.
A search for the instances of gold as found in the electric text corpus of Sumerian literature fails to find any reference to any ancient gods mining gold. In the 12th planet, Sitchin claims that Bel Namiki, that's the next exaltation of Ea, okay, should be translated Lord of Mining. However, there's no justification for this translation, and neither do any of the portrayals of Ea in the Sumerian text associate him with lordship over ancient gold mines. In reality, Ea is routinely associated with wisdom or knowledge, providing further grounds for the common translation of Bel Namiki as meaning Lord of Wisdom. Now, Ea is a trinity, and the trinity is Ea-Ea-O. No, that was from an old text I just made up, just like Sitchin did, okay? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we're getting.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying is that Sitchin, everything he's claiming is of his own creation.
He made it up, yes. Okay. The Sumerian corpus nowhere states that the creation of Adama or mankind was done so that humanity could serve as a slave species to mine gold. And it certainly does not predict that Anunnaki scientists crossing alien DNA with primates. Sumerian literature plainly tells the story of humanity being created by the gods to assist in the process of creation itself. As humans multiplied and grew too noisome, the gods became annoyed and sent a great deluge to wipe them out. The cuneiform has it that one man was instructed to build a boat, and he and his family and select animals were saved from the 7 days and 7 nights of rain which caused a flood. Now, there's lots of similarities in there between the biblical, which is the correct interpretation of the flood, and this. Now,
yeah,
they came up with their own versions of things. And basically, when Moses did the books of the Bible, a lot of things that he did there was to correct the false impressions that were given up until that time. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about Nibiru. I did say a little bit about it. Now, according to Sitchin, the purpose of attaining gold from Earth was to save the planet Nibiru, a planet from beyond Pluto, which travels through our solar system every 3,600 years. Dr. Michael S. Heiser, he has a PhD in Hebrew Bible and ancient Semitic languages, the University of Wisconsin and Madison, has written a paper on the subject of Nibiru as it actually appears in the cuneiform text, which illuminates the actual ancient context and usage of this term considerably. Drawing on the work of several experts, including the esteemed Sumerian scholar Benno Landsberger, and also utilizing the Chicago Assyrian Dictionary, Heisler analyzed all the known cuneiform texts that mention Nibiru. He found that the term is only used in astronomical or deific contexts to refer to 4 subjects. 1, the planet Jupiter. 2, the planet Mercury. 3, the god Marduk. And 4, a star. Okay? Okay, we can acknowledge this fourfold application of that word would cause some confusion among the scholars, basically. I mean, you got 4 different references there to the same word, Nibiru. Now, Heisler points out one thing is certain from the text. Nibiru is never identified as a planet beyond Pluto. Okay. So Heisler sums up the Nibiru data from the ancient text contra Sitchin in 6 points. First, Nibiru is called a star. Second, Nibiru is called a planet, nearly always Jupiter Marduk, but once Mercury, and never anything beyond Pluto or the known planets. 3, the Samaritans, by their own records, knew of only 5 planets and accepted the sun and the moon as planets. 4, Nibiru is never mentioned in any respect with the Anunnaki. It is never said to have been or to be inhabited. 5, Nibiru is both a fixed star in some relationship with constellations. Whether it's a member or just in proximity, it's unknown. We don't know that, okay? But that apparently that holds them in their courses, and maybe that's where he got the planet of the crossing, Sitchin. That's what I think. But it's also described as changing position and crossing the sky at times. And 6, the most damaging of all,
as if the first 5
as if the first 5 didn't just totally debunk it.
Yeah.
Number 6, Nibiru was seen every year, which kind of demolishes Sitchin's view of the 3,600-year cycle. No, wait a minute, they saw it every year? Okay, well, maybe they had awesome telescopes, huh?
Yeah, something.
So how did 3,600-year cycle planet show up every year, to the Samaritans?
Yeah, that can't.
So, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
So Sitchin's claim that the Samaritans had extensive knowledge of the solar system is incompatible with the system of cosmoastrology recorded by the Samaritans themselves. The Sumerians, while their texts do associate particular planets with certain deities, the cuneiform never actually mentions more than 7 planetary bodies, counting the sun and the moon. Okay. For example, the 2 Whitcomb tablets date the rising of 36 fixed stars, as well as the paths of Venus, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Mercury, and the sun and the moon. That's it. So now I'm going to show you, there's a cylinder seal, VA243, that's used as evidence by Sitchin. And it's a tablet showing the gods, and up above there's a sun-looking type symbol with 11 dots around it. And that's where he got his 12th planet theory from. So we're going to look at this cylinder seal in detail, and we're going to see what it says and what it's really about.
Right,
okay,
we'll just leave it up on the screen for everybody.
Yeah, in the 12th planet, Sitchin cites this cylinder seal VA243, and that's in a museum in Berlin, by the way. So, in case you wonder where it's at, it's in a museum in Berlin. As evidence that the Samaritans have acquired extensive knowledge of the solar system from extraterrestrials. The seal has since become famous among proponents of Sitchin's theories, and has sent numerous researchers on quests around the world to discover similar works. Sitchin claims that the symbolic image in the upper left of the seal represents the sun and 11 planetary bodies, thus affirming his 12th planet scenario. The image is of a central circular globe enclosed within a 6-rayed star, surrounded by 11 small dots. However, as Heisler points out, celestial objects with 6, 7, and 8 points in Sumerian art always represent stars distinct from our local sun. So it's not a sun, they're stars distinct from our local sun. The Samaritans actually represented the local sun and the solar deity Utu or Shamash, they called them 2 different names, with one of 2 symbols, either a circle with 4 arms between which emanated 4 waves, or the solar winged disk. Neither of these symbols appear on the VA243, okay? Furthermore, Samaritan art is replete with examples when the true symbol of the sun appears alongside the 6, 7, or 8-rayed symbol for a star that does appear on this VA243. demonstrating that the solar and stellar symbols were not interchangeable in the Sumerian cosmos. Okay, so they're distinct. They're not interchangeable.
Yeah.
That's not a sun and 11 planets. Okay, it's
Yeah.
been suggested that VA 243 may actually represent an offering being made to a fertility deity. This could be supported by the interpretation of the seal, which reads, Donsaga Ilala Ilat, you're his servant. And we're going to go over all the different writings on here too. So, in fact, there's hundreds of cylinder seals similar to this one, known as offering seals, which feature a 6, 7, or 8 rayed star symbol above the heads of the deities in order to distinguish them from mortals in the imagery. So when you saw these star symbols above these heads, that symbolized a deity. Okay. If you didn't see it, they were men. They were regular human beings.
That makes sense.
But, why are we doing this, first of all? Why are we testing these theories, all right? Well, it's vitally important to question any narrative that purports to explain the origins of mankind, okay? That's the bottom line.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Our origins and our place in the cosmos. Our Sitchin's works, along with those of von Daniken and several others, they've triggered more rise to a theory which today is more of an industry than a field of research. And by industry, I mean, it sells by offering an intriguing explanation for mankind's origin, the ancient genetic engineering, an apocalypse, that Nibiru returns and destroys, a hope for future redemption when these ETs return to save us, and a new type of scientific deity, the aliens themselves. So, the ancient astronaut theory may be properly defined as a growing religion,
Yeah.
Recent,
not a lot of.
Yeah, it has a lot of the same things. They alter and twist texts. They do.
Yeah.
They morph things.
More faith than Christianity.
Really? Okay. 20th Century Fox did a survey, and they revealed about half the Americans believe in the existence of extraterrestrials, while slightly less than 39% believe aliens have visited Earth in the past. So, is the ancient astronaut theory, is that rising to fill a void left by the decline in traditional religions? It makes you wonder. It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, they're relying on mistranslations of ancient texts. They're being based on fantasies of writers, using divine or religious symbols and stories, basically to promote a capitalistic endeavor, money. Pay us, buy this literature, and the problem with this stuff is it is cool. It's a fascinating theory. I bought his books. I bought von Daniken. I bought these books. I read them. They were fascinating. They had stories of giants and ancient structures, and they had interesting stuff in them. And I was fascinated by it until I started to actually research them. And I found out that
he's a fiction writer.
This is all fiction. But what a mind to come up with this stuff.
He could be a great fiction writer. I mean, look at George R. Martin and Game of Thrones. That's
exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not right.
They were really cool stories, but that's all they are. Is in fact they're stories.
Yeah.
But, another reason the ancient astronaut theory should be regarded with a healthy degree of skepticism is that something that's emerged that's become a universal X factor to explain many of our real mysteries of humanity's past, okay? Anything that's unique or unusual that humans done, aliens built it, ancient aliens built it. What they're doing and what they're confusing is, the Nephilim had fallen sons of God, fallen, angelic beings as fathers, and they taught them. They taught them their knowledge. They taught them a vast knowledge. They taught them astronomy. They taught them building. They taught them physics. They taught them, things that put them well above the humanity at that point in time.
Yeah.
So, a lot of these things that the Nephilim giants built, the hybrid results of the sons of God and the daughters of men that they built, they're saying, these ancient aliens came and built this stuff,
Yeah.
And that's the problem with this kind of stuff. The genetic tampering, ancient aliens becoming envelopes to explain our archaeological, astronomy, our artificial elongated crania, the ancient megalithic structures, all that stuff. Now,
it's
it's
just a story. There's no fact behind it.
Unfortunately, yes. It's grown to a point of encompassing the totality of our history.
Yeah.
You know, it leads researchers to overlook the very real human element, that gave birth to the ancient world. And that's a really big problem with this kind of stuff. So, okay, bottom line, what we found out from researching this stuff is these seals were actually talismans that were meant to encourage the Sumerian people to reflect on their gods and do good. No more. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
A careful translation of these seals indicate that they have nothing to do with space travel or the so-called Naburians. These seals relate to being good luck talismans, reminding the bearer of the seals to worship their gods, not space travel. That's the bottom line. Now we're going to look at some other seals, some other parts of this seal, and we're going to go over the writings and text on them. So now here's a different seal. This is depicting actual stars, deities, and we're gonna explain a little of this in great detail here. So, then in the above figure there, you see a number of Sumerian signs. There's 3 figures. There's signs associated with these 3 figures. Okay, the first one we're going to look at over here to our left is a 16-point star. Details this, on this cylinder, a 16-point star. It's what it is. It's a sign of kingship, which is represented by the figure, which is a star-shaped, includes 16 points. The dots read Li, and the line is I. In Sumerian, Li I means to become visible or to shine. So that star symbol there means to be visible or to shine. Next we see 2 gods. On the left we see a human fish figure. This god represents the god Ea, E-I-E-I-O, who was a fish. He was like a fish and is supposed to be the creator of man. The other god is probably Enlil. The hands of the gods are pointing to the log representing the signs I-Ta and reads, "Send forth his touch." Between the gods and above them we see a log-shaped figure with a number of lines. On the right-hand side of the log we see 2 signs, a hook with a line under it. The hook is probably the U sign. The line is read I. The 2 signs would read UI, witness amazement. In the center of the log we see a dot, Li, a half circle, A, under the dot and a fan-like symbol, Pa. Under the fan is a large half circle, A. The symbol reads Li-A-Pa-I, or become a visible or strong leader, the Father. Now here we have this is one of them. They say, oh, this is a flying ship. There's a god in his flying ship. Now we're going to translate what this says here on this.
Oh.
At the end of the log on the left-hand side, we see 3 signs, a vertical line, I, with 2 horizontal lines, Gu, between it and another vertical line. These signs read I, Gu, I, or become a visible witness to benefit man. Under the sign, in the center of the seal, we see a symbol surrounded by a dot line symbol. And that looks like this. In the center of the seal, we see a symbol that's surrounded by a dot line symbol, which equals Li-I, become visible. The next sign is the U, powerful, nourish. Within the U sign, we see repeatedly the dot Li sign between 2 lines on either side, Gu, which is Gu, Li-Gu, send forth substance. These symbols probably read, become visible, a powerful leader or father to send forth substance for mankind. The Enlil situated at the end of the seal has his hand made in the shape of the 2 sign and reads I too, send forth the libitation. The god Ea's hands is shaped in the sign of I-Ta and reads send forth his or the touch. Send forth the touch. So, okay, let's read this. We're going to read this seal from right to left. The signs to the right to the left read Mi my e I ta mi gi I udu mi gidu lu ama me. So what'd you think of that? I better read that in English. So yeah, okay. In English it says, the diviner has much power from the deity to send forth blessings. Send forth the character of the diviner. Act to send forth amazement, to nourish the oracle and sustain man. The strong father sends forth the oracle. Not much about the Anunnaki and
No.
12 planets in that one, is there?
No.
Okay, next we see on there is this figure that resembles an arrow or a spear seated on a base. This spear or arrow figure is made up of a number of signs. They read Pa Ta U, reveal the character of a powerful man. On the left side of the spear arrow figure, we see a number of signs beginning with a wave sign slightly above the head of the god. The wavy sign is Zai, and reads righteousness or breath of life. The god's hand points to the top of the spear. The other hand is changed in the Ta signs. In other words, sends forth his touch. Below this hand we see two columns of signs. There are three signs to the right. Sua U, which reads wisdom spouts from the father / leader, and amazement. Now I'm going to show you all these. Here's a picture of them broken down. And we're going to show you all this because it reads out into a sentence here.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, there's five signs on the left side under the hand, and they read Mimi Ta Bi Ta O Ta O. The phenomena oracle is open up speech and entrust benefit for man. Okay, so above the wavy line we see a figure that has a U symbol. Above a circle between two boxes or logs with a fan under the circular figure. The U symbol equals U. The box figure reads Bu Mesh, the circle sign Ta, and the fan below the circle is Pa. This figure reads U Bu Mesh Tabu Mesh Pa. The powerful man supports the character of a super perfect diviner and leader. It's important to note that when a sign's doubled, it represents replication, okay, or plural, the plural nature of a sign. So there's Proto-Sumerian signs behind the middle god. Between the god at the far left of the seal, the first sign is a half moon, which reads you or gaze at. The rest of the signs reading from the top to the bottom are Lumi Tami Ta Gung Luma Mimi Bi Tu Mi Lai I. What'd you think of that? Oh, you want me to? I better play the English. Okay, the English of this says, "Gaze at the man of power. Open up the divine decree. Entrust benefit to human beings. Distribute the oracle's divine decree to witnesses' speech. Go forth to make a libatation at the oracle." Okay, so this seal is also relating to offering libatation to the gods at an oracle. This oracle appears to speak to the supplicants. Given the text on the seal, the figure on the log probably represents Anu, the sky creator of all gods. These seals are telling mankind to offer a libatation to Anu to make this god a visible figure in their life. That's the bottom line. That's what this tablet's telling us, okay? Now, here's a picture of the text of the tablet again. And I've highlighted the lines where there's words, okay, words and script. Now we're going to decipher this script and see what it says, okay. There's the three lines.
Yeah.
These are the actual writing on the tablet, okay. There's actually four. The second one is the bottom line, okay.
Yeah. All
right. So we're going to do a Sumerian reading of the 12th planet seal, not the Zachariah Sitchin reading, okay. Proto-Sumerian Seal 4 is a very interesting Sumerian cylinder seal titled VA-243. This is a famous seal because ancient alien theorists believe it describes the Anunnaki migration to Earth. Michael S. Heisner in The Myth of the 12th Planet, a brief analysis of cylinder seal VA-243, argues that this seal does not support the theory of a 12th planet popularized by Zachariah Sitchin. It was first translated in 1940 by Anton Morgat. Morgat published his translation in the Berlin Museum's publication of its seal collection, because that's where it's at. That's where it's located at. So, anyway, there's a Mesopotamian scholar, Anton Morgat. He's the guy that translated originally. Dr. Heiser provides an English translation of the German text as follows. Line 1, Dubsiga is a personal name, Dubsiga, and apparently he was a powerful person in the Sumerian hierarchies. The second line reads Ilat Lat Now, Iliad. That's another personal name. This time that's the seal's owner.
Okay.
Now, line 3 says, R3 Sud and Catch. That's German for your servant. So, in other words, it's saying, Desugnia Iliad, you're his servant. Your/his servant. Okay, although that's Morgoth's translation of the seal, my reading is going to be a little different because I'm going to be reading the linear Sumerian instead of the cuneiform, okay? Now, if you examine this cylinder seal, it indicates it was a talisman. That's all. In addition to the 3 boxes of text discussed by Morgoth, there's also iconographic elements in the cylinder seal that also represents linear Sumerian signs, as illustrated in Proto-Sumerians. Okay, I'm not going to decipher all that stuff or read the star and dot signs because we already went through that kind of stuff, okay? Mm-hmm. But the seal, it reads as follows. The divinity has power to raise up the talisman's divine decree for this man. The depth of the talisman is to perfect the diviner. God perfect this man's divine decrees. This talisman commands it. Make perfect the liberations. Make liberations to the oracle. Pure esteem that goes to heaven. That's the translation of this tablet, okay? To summarize, these seals relate to being good luck talismans, reminding the bearer of the seals to worship their gods, not space travel. It has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
This discussion on Proto-Sumerian seal writing, that system makes it clear that there's various ancient people in Sumner who use both the linear syllable script and this script. Now, the seal inscriptions on the Sumerian left appear to have served as talismans or amulets. The seals were carved to illustrate the devotion of the Sumerians to their gods and their goddesses. Plain and simple. That's the bottom. That's the bottom line. So, unsurprisingly, Sitchin's versions of the Anunnaki are nowhere to appear in ancient Sumerian literature. Now, there's a lot of references to Watcher technology, and their megalithic structures, and not just on Earth, but on the Moon and other planets too. Now, I'm gonna read something from Tom Horn's book, okay. And this is what we're going to get to with what we're going to work our way into is the coming deception. They're going to tell us, they're going to try to utilize this stuff and say, oh, well, these extraterrestrials come down and they mutated human DNA and they created us and they're our gods and they're our creators and stuff. But so we're going to look at a little bit of ancient structures and things like that tie into the Watchers. The most dynamic question then arises concerning whether these megalithic builders, known as Watchers, would have also built similar structures on other planets, which perhaps were under their jurisdiction before the Great War between God and Lucifer. This could be echoed in places like Ezekiel chapter 28, where the proud angel is called the anointed cherub that covereth, Lucifer, who was upon the holy mountain of God and who walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Now, we talked about that in our one podcast, and went over that quite extensively. So, they need to look at our Mars podcast. We go over this quite extensively. Now,
that was a really good episode, and yes, now you're tying in the stuff that we referenced in that episode as well.
Verse 14 it says, because of the fallen angel's sin, God declared, I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God. I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. So, we believe that these represent a planetary belt. So, it's not unreasonable to imagine that Lucifer and his angels once held command over certain of the planetoids. These worlds may have had artificial structures built on them, maybe even pyramidal or sphinx-like in shape, somehow related to the presence of those mighty angels, the ruins which could be discovered someday or rediscovered someday. In the book of Job, where the prophet details how God destroyed the literal dwelling place of the angels who made insurrection against him, that's in Job 26, 11 to 13, okay? I'm too lazy to look it up, so you can look it up. Anyway, it specifically mentions the destruction of Rahab, a planetary body also known as Pride, from which God drove the fugitive snake. Okay.
What was it?
Job 26:11 to 13.
Job 26, 11, Job 26,
Yeah,
11 to 16?
Yes. It specifically mentions the destruction of Rahab,
Well, let's look
known
real
as
quick.
Pride.
I can do my part here. You do a lot of the stuff when you're on the podcast, Uncle Mark, because I am not as well versed in some of the topics that you are. So let me pull my weight here a little bit here. Job 26. What were the verses again?
11 to 13.
11 to 13. All right. I'm going to read this. If anybody wants to follow along, that's Job 26, 11 to 13. The pillars of the heavens quake, aghast at his rebuke. By his power he churned up the sea. By his wisdom he cut Rahab to pieces. By his breath the skies became fair. And you're absolutely right. It says Rahab right in the scripture.
That brings us up to a second hypothetical question. If edifices on the earth were built to mirror those on these angel planets, what was their purpose? Why were they building this stuff? Could it have been somehow create a binding or an unholy symmetry between the fallen angels and man's sphere?
Yeah.
We find indications of such a scheme all over the ancient world, where structures, circular mazes, altars, and mounds related to the Watchers and their giant offspring served the purpose of making contact with and homage to these beings. Okay, so for instance, the Golden Heights. There's a huge Stonehenge-like monument that archaeologists believe to be as many as 5,000 years old. It's called Gilgam Rephaim, or the Circle of the Rephaim. Now, we talked about that in one of our podcasts, too.
Yeah, actually, I think two different ones, actually.
Yes, we went, one of them we did quite extensively on it.
Yeah.
But one feature of Gilgam Rephaim Circle is the meanings of the two large openings, somewhat like doorways, one facing northeast, the other southeast. Israeli journalist Barry Chema says, in '68, Professor Yonahan Mizrahi of the Department of Anthropology at Harvard University and Professor Anthony Anvani of Colgate University discovered that in 3000 BCE, the first rays of the summer solstice would have appeared directly through the northeast opening as seen from the central tumulus. At the same time, the southeast opening provided a direct view of Sirius. Thus, one function of the Gilgam-Rephaim circles, as with similar sites, appears to have been the desire to create a connection between Earth with certain astronomical locations, in this case the star Sirius, okay? This particular cosmological site, Sirius, was considered by ancient Egyptians as the heavenly whereabouts of the goddess Isis, and by Freemasons as the home of Lucifer. Such a nexus between this planet and the mythological home of Lucifer is suggested, including the idea that discovery of artificial structures on a planet in that region bearing eerie similarity to buildings on Earth could be made someday. If they were, could this play a role in the Great Deception, spoken in 2 Thessalonians? Probably,
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't people be quick to point to Mars and then the Egyptian desert and say, see, here's proof. We came from aliens. The Bible's a hoax. Such extraordinary findings would undoubtedly challenge a great deal of our Earth-centric theologies, bottom line.
Yeah.
Even science communities in recent years have speculated that artificial structures may just be waiting to be discovered on other planets. In fact, the teams of astronomers have of late argued that the best way to find extraterrestrial intelligence, either dead or gone or still alive, would be to search for their signposts in the form of megastructures that may stand out as unnatural on other worlds or artificial satellites in orbit around ET planets called Dyson Spheres. Okay, a Dyson Sphere is a hypothetical structure originally designed by a theoretical physician and mathematician, Freeman Dyson, okay? He speculated that extraterrestrial societies that survived long enough would eventually build massive starlight or solar collectors to harness their energy. Searching for such artificial structures might lead to the detection of advanced alien life, he thought, or that's what he believed, okay?
Yeah, it's a sphere, if I can, because I'm a...
You know what a Dyson Sphere is, yeah.
I do, actually, because of Star Trek. Not everything in Star
Right.
Trek is made up crap.
Right.
It's
a lot of Star
it's
Trek
based in
has
theory.
factual theories behind
factual
it. Yeah,
theories, and then of course things that haven't been proven or can't be proven, they take some liberties, of course. But Dyson Spheres, I do know what Dyson Spheres are. Theoretically, it's like it harnesses the power of a star, and then you could live on the surface of the Dyson, on the inside of the surface of the Dyson Sphere,
right?
And
the
amount of power you could be.
It's structurally intact. If forces directed upon it, it becomes stronger. So it withstands hurricane forces and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so
and it would. Theoretically, it could also withstand that. Like, assuming if there were aliens out there or whatever, and they had strong ships, it would also. If you were inside a Dyson Sphere, it would be
protect,
more. Yeah, you'd be protected from it. It would protect from outside.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's still other things. Discovery of artificiality has already been made on at least one other planet. Can we say Mars? Anyway, and massively covered up by a League of Nations, being held back until a specific time of official disclosure. This find was made right where Mission to Mars director suggested it would be, and guess where? Cydonia. We talked about that in our Mars podcast, didn't we?
Yep.
So, okay. Now this I got from a Tom Horn interview. Before this guy, Dr. Tom Van Flandern, okay, he held a PhD in astronomy, specializing in celestial mechanics, the theory of orbits. He died of cancer in 2009, but before he did, he granted this interview. Now, okay, he was from Yale University. He spent 21 years as a U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., where he became the chief of the Celestial Mechanics branch of the Nautical Almanac Office. For the last decade of his life, Professor Flanders was a research associate at the University of Maryland Physics Department in College Park, Maryland, and a consultant to the Army Research Laboratory in Adelphi, Maryland, working on improving the accuracy of the GPS systems. The American Spectator, Solar magazines, and others often quoted him. In other words, this guy's no dummy, okay? He's a smart man. He challenged Einstein's theory of relativity. He had some outspoken beliefs that the artificial structures dotting the Martian landscape were being obfuscated by NASA and other national powers that caught our attention. Now, I'm going to read a little bit of an interview from Tom Horn and him, okay? Horn says, this was back in 2007. Horn says, on your website there's a page where the high-resolution spacecraft photos of Mars appear to show artificial structures. Tell us about these. Van Flandern. The biggest surprise of the space program to date has been the finding of several categories of anomalies on the surface of Mars that, if seen on Earth, would certainly be attributed to human activity. These include an abundance of special shapes not normally found in nature, such as closed triangles and pyramids, vehicle-like tracks and trails across otherwise featureless desert terrain, mostly underground networks of huge glassy tubes apparently extending for hundreds of miles, visible in places where the surface is cracked, and seemingly to connect interesting surface places, odd patterns and symbols, and an abundance of large-scale artistic imagery, such as the 5 known faces on Mars, and some geographs reminiscent of those of the plains of Nazca in Peru. Now, in our Mars podcast, we showed several of these faces. We showed pyramids. We showed ruined structures.
Both on Mars and here on the Earth.
Yes, and showed the similarity between them, in fact, didn't we?
Yeah.
Horn, what stands out to you as most as the special shapes on Mars that do not normally arise in nature? Van Flandern. Closed triangles with sharp vertices and straight sides are not normally seen in nature. 3, 4, and 5-sided pyramids are also rare, yet many of these are found on Mars, but not on any other planet or moon yet examined in similar detail. On the Elysium plains of Mars, there may be an entire field of pyramid-shaped objects laid out in linear arrays. Horn, describe the objects on Mars you call glassy tubes. Van Flandern. From an examination of hundreds of these objects, we know that they are tube-like shapes, typically 50 to 100 meters in diameter. 50 to 100 meters in diameter.
That's big.
White bands wrap around the tube around every 10 meters along its entire length. The material between bands is translucent, and we can faintly see the white bands on the underside through the tube. When direct sunlight is available, it reflects from the tube in a mirror-like way instead of just scattering the light. Where a boulder has damaged the tube, we often see a collapsed tube section where broken white bands lie flat on the surface and sharp spine-like portions of broken bands jut out from an intact but torn tube section. Tubes are visible mainly in fissures or where a flood has eroded away the topsoil. In some places they can be traced underground in infrared images that can detect such things if they're not too far below the surface. Some tubes cross one another, one above, one below, in perpendicular intersections, while others have junctions where one tube becomes two or vice versa. In a few places, many tubes come together in patterns suggestive of terminals for train stations. Horn, what else can be seen that might be of special interest? In certain places on Mars, especially near the location of the former equator of the planet, we see artistic imagery, sometimes in abundance, although not always with distinct clarity. Moreover, the shapes that seen are not random, but depict familiar terrestrial images in organized groupings. For example, in one region of Mars named Cydonia, we see an apparent mosaic scene showing impressions of sky, land, and water, with animal shapes organized in appropriate sections of the mosaic. Amphibious creatures are in the water area, animals on the land area, and airy creatures in the air area. However, millions of years of dust storms and erosion have left many of the images more impressionistic than lifelike. Had the images been as distinct as the words I must use to describe them, the shockwaves from this discovery would have already traveled around the world. Interesting, to say the least. Horn, what distinguishes many artistic faces and other familiar shapes on Mars from faces and shapes seen in clouds and natural landscapes here on Earth? In other words, is your mind playing tricks on you?
Yeah.
Van Flandern, it is possible to see even very detailed shapes in random noisy backgrounds, but some of the Martian shapes appear against flat, featureless backgrounds. The context and relationship appropriateness is additional evidence that these are not products of geology or random processes. But the most compelling proof, to a scientist at least, is the fulfillment of what we call a priori prediction. Okay, now a priori prediction is, for example, if you dealt a 13-card hand and you get all 13 spades, you might wonder if that was an accident or the result of a fixed deck, because the odds against that happening by chance are 635 billion to 1. Yet every specific random deal of 13 unique cards had the same odds against happening by chance. So unlikely events like unlikely card hands can and do happen by chance. Yet if I predicted that on the next deal your hand would contain 13 spades, and it did, you could be sure at odds of 635 billion to 1 that was not a lucky guess but the result of a controlled process.
Yeah.
Somebody did something there.
Yeah.
So that's how the priority principle works. Okay, so through the power of predictions, basically, bottom line. Now, when the Viking spacecraft saw an apparent face on Mars in the Cydonia region, that was interesting, but that could easily have been a trick of light and shadow. So scientists formulated tests to tell whether the object was natural, a project of geology and illusion, or artificial, a project of intelligences. The first 8 such tests initially gave a split decision, 5-3, in favor of artificiality. 2 of those tests were based on the fact that the Cydonia face object cannot be seen from the ground, but must be viewed from above, for example, from an orbiting space station, maybe? So if it's artificial, it would logically be built on the equator of Mars and built upright. But the Cydonia face was far from the equator, latitude 41 degrees north, and was tilted from upright by an angle of about 35 degrees. So those statistics favored a natural origin. Then in 1996, we took a look at the pole shift of Mars to see where the face-like object was before the pole shift.
There was a pole shift?
So
I thought you had said where the equator used to be. earlier, and I was going to ask you about that. So
Yeah.
Mars doesn't sit on the same pole it used to?
We'll get to that in a little bit here, yes. The answer was exactly, in 1996, we took a look at the pole shift of Mars to see where the face-like object was before the pole shift. The answer was exactly on the old equator and upright within 2 degrees. The odds of that happening by chance are roughly 100,000 to 1. So if the builders were active before the cataclysm that tipped the poles of Mars, the explosion of the other 3.2 million years ago, then both these tests indicate an artificial origin. By the end of that year, all 8 tests favored an artificial origin over a natural one. Now, in our podcast on Mars, we showed this face on Mars.
Yeah, we did.
And they, the NASA came back later on and they said, "Oh, this is just a rough mountain, a terrain." They said.
Yeah.
What it was a mound in Iran. I have a photograph of it from Iran. That's what they tried to show you, saying it was a face. Now, why they lie about that kind of stuff, I'm not sure yet. But anyway, I digress. But anyway. By the end of that year, all 8 tests favored an artificial origin over a natural one. As compelling as this conclusion was to any mind open to either possibility, it still needed confirmation. So in 1997, the Society for Planetary SETI Research, an association of about 30 independent scientists, sent a few representatives to NASA to request priority imaging of the Cydonia face-like object by the high-resolution camera on the newly arrived Mars Global Surveyor spacecraft. They then set down criteria for distinguishing artificial from natural well before any results were known. In brief, and only if the object was artificial, the impression of a humanoid eye, nose, and mouth in the original images should be supplemented by secondary facial features in any detailed new image. These specifically included an eyebrow over the eye socket, an iris inside the eye socket, nostrils at the large end of the tapered nose, and evidence of lips in the mouth feature. Specifics were set down for the qualifying size, shape, location, and orientation of these features on the mesa. Moreover, the tester required no qualifying features appear in the background so that our minds could form apparent facial features so they couldn't form facial features from randomness, as our minds tend to do, okay? So, when the spacecraft images were returned to Earth in April 1998, every prediction was fulfilled. This was like predicting a deal of 13 spades in advance, except that the combined odds against this happening by chance at Cydonia were 1,000 billion to 1. That left no doubt in the minds of scientists familiar with the priority principle that the Cydonia face had to be an artificial structure. 1,000 billion to 1 odds is pretty much as saying what we were saying. This is okay. So Horn says, "Well, can you give us another example of ruling out a natural origin for some of these artistic features?" And Flandern said, "Yes. One of the animal shapes elsewhere on Mars resembled a puma, but it wasn't detailed enough to be persuasive, and the edge of the spacecraft photograph left the hindquarters cut off and unseen. So the scientists who found the image, J.P. Levasseur, predicted that the image was artificial if and only if the missing hindquarters completed an animal hind section and legs and contained a puma-like tail extending from the right place on its hindquarters. Anything else from the unlimited number of possibilities would indicate that there was a natural origin. A few years later, the spacecraft, by request, took another image that included the hindquarters area and showed the completion of an animal hindquarters and hind legs and a marvelous tail to the right proportions extending from just the right place." Wow. That's pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah, that is interesting.
So, what's the connection? This is Warren. What's the connection between possible artifacts on Mars and the exploded planet hypothesis you discussed on your website? Okay, his thesis was Mars was a moon of original planet, which I think was Rahab.
Yeah.
Okay, and when God destroyed Rahab, it not only blew up the planet, tilted it on its axis, but there was interplanetary war between them two before God destroyed Rahab.
Okay.
And we know that because we talked about in our Mars podcast. You need to watch that.
Yep.
We talked about how the amount of radon, xeon, krypton, and all these others, and also that burial, the glass-like substance that spread out for hundreds of miles. There was only one possible explanation, and that was a nuclear bomb, a nuclear explosion. There was 2 nuclear explosions set up in the atmosphere above Cydonia and one other region, and we talk about that in our Mars podcast. But,
yep.
Well, this is Van Flanders' explanation. The explosion of the water world body Mars was orbiting until 3.2 million years ago produced the most recent pole shift on Mars that moved the Cydonia face from the equator to its present location, tilting it by 35 degrees. This tells us that the builders of these amazing surface features predated the explosion, and that their civilization was probably terminated by that explosion. Moreover, we see no evidence of a primary civilization on Mars, making the exploded water world the most likely location for that civilization. Indeed, that speculation makes sense on speculation because of our own civilization ahead a few thousand years. Trips to the moon will by then be routine for tourists. The first thing they will see on board an orbiting spaceship will be a close-up overview of the entire moon. It will then be a natural step for many activities on the lunar surface: telescopes, mining operations, laboratories, communication centers, etc., all to attract tourists and tourist dollars by building surface exhibits that can be seen from the orbiting space station. Now, his theory is that Mars was a moon that that wasn't colonized. We saw on our Mars broadcast that there was definitely buildings and ruins and stuff that they had colonized their moon. Okay, so that's something that we've kind of disagree in that respect on his. Now, he might. They could still have colonized the moon like we might in 1,000 years too, and they may have had all them buildings on there too.
Yeah.
So I can't really discredit that way, but we know there's many ruins and buildings and things on Mars that are artificial structures.
Yeah.
So anyway, our moon wouldn't be a lot unlike what we're seeing today on Mars. Surface exhibits that can be best viewed from an orbiting space station. However, if that was the function of the artistic Mars images, that would imply Mars was the civilization's moon, not its homeworld, and the latter was lost by explosion 3.2 million years ago, a date that is reliably determined from the orbital period of new comet orbits. So, one can't help but wonder if that exploded planet was Rahab. And,
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
From which God drove the fugitive snake. So, there's lots of ruins on Mars. There's probably, from what I've seen, there's ruins on the moon, and they're probably going to, bring this stuff out. So, and like I said, the ancient astronaut theory is a fascinating account of our origins, but it's not real. It's not true.
It's not real. Yeah.
Unfortunately, and like I say, I was intrigued, and I bought books from Stitchen and Von Daniken, because they had a lot of neat stuff in it. They had, a lot of stuff about giants. They had. Ancient ruins and some stuff that were fascinating topics.
Yeah.
But once investigated, it kind of falls flat on its face.
Yeah.
But what a mind to come up with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. There's still some interesting fiction there. Yeah.
And the thing is their thesis would be correct if they altered that to the truths of Genesis 6, Enoch, the Book of the Giants, the Jubilees, where the fallen angels taught their offspring how to build and how to do these works and how to make these alignments and stuff. If they'd have just brought it over to the true side of things, they could have had a fascinating, true account of a lot of this stuff. And a lot of their things with giants and ancient structures and all would tie right into it. So, but still, a fascinating mind. These people that are bought into this and that are seeing this, I understand that. It's fascinating and it's another explanation. But unfortunately, if you look at the actual Samaritan text, it doesn't hold water. It doesn't have anything to do with anything they're talking about in their books. So that's it in a nutshell. I don't know. I would like them to look at some of our other podcasts because they tie into this stuff, but don't be fooled by this coming deception. They're going to tell you, oh, look at the structures up here. These aliens, they've come for your benefit, and they're going to take you to the next level, they're going to be your saviors, and they created us, and they ordered these monkeys into this DNA and using their DNA, and they're going to try and show you from these other works. Now, there's lots of people wrote on this topic, and they just took Sitchin's word for truth. Oh, well, that's what this means.
Yeah.
Where we've now shown you that that's not it at all.
Yeah.
So. Unfortunately, they're
and that's the great deception part that you were talking about at the beginning of the episode, is that they're going to try and fool people about. They're going to try and destroy basically what modern religion is in the world, not just Christianity, but Judaism, Catholicism,
they're going to bring
Islam. They want to end all of them and give you
bring us all under this ancient alien astronaut theory.
Yeah. And that's what I know Uncle Mark can talk a lot. He gives so much information sometimes, but that was the chief point of what he was saying, and why he was telling you what I'm sorry, what was his name again?
Zachariah Sitchin.
Sitchin. Yeah. That's why he was letting you know what Sitchin was saying, and then giving you the facts about how he was wrong. Right. Because that's what they're going to try and do. They're going to try and fool you with the origins of mankind.
Exactly.
It's not that but it's flawed, as we've just demonstrated, as Uncle Mark has just demonstrated.
Yes.
I did very little.
And we're snitching on stitching.
Yeah, that was what Uncle Mark wanted to call the podcast, but I told him that I didn't even know what that meant, and I didn't think anybody else would either. So, and that's what we're saying, is that these theories, while it's a great story and it's certainly fascinating and interesting, to classify things, so is the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, excellent.
It's a great TV show, and if you took his writings and made it into a TV show, it might make a great TV show or a great movie.
In fact, they did the Ancient Alien broadcast show. There was a show on it.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that actually until you just said that. You're right.
And they would always say, "Could this be the works of ancient aliens?"
Yeah.
That's
how they always end.
So they're priming, they're priming the world for this stuff. They're priming you guys to accept this stuff. Now, a lot of these books and all, they're cashing in, trying to get the money off of it.
Yeah.
And that's why they never really research a lot of stuff themselves. They just, this is great, let's go with this.
And that's how they'll get you too, is by that's how they'll tell you something, and then they'll say, well, isn't this possible? And if you say, well, yeah, I suppose it's possible, because you've already lost the conversation or argument, the debate. You've already lost it. You've already conceded the point that it could be possible. But we've just demonstrated that there's lots of holes.
Yeah, and I understand. I was intrigued by it. I bought the books. I have his books, and I was intrigued by it. I thought it was fascinating. But when I started to research it and look into it a little deeper, it was like, oh crap, that ain't oh man, what? Well, that's not what this says. And so the more I looked, the more the more it fell apart.
Yep.
So, don't fall for the ancient astronaut theory and the coming deception, because it's gonna, the Bible says they're gonna have deceiving signs and wonders to back this stuff up.
Oh yeah.
And that if it was possible, they could fool the elect. So, they're going to have a bunch of stuff to back up what they're saying. And just like Sitchin's books and all, it's fascinating until you take it, you look at it, you start breaking it down, and then you realize, this isn't
and
real.
That's something that we say often on this podcast, is to do your own homework. Go and do your own research. Go look it up for yourself. Don't just take our word for it. You don't have to take our word. That's why we're so confident in what we say. Because you don't have to take our word for it. You can go do your own research. The research, as long as you know how to do some research.
We encourage that,
and you're not completely blinded. You're open to understanding what the facts are. We're going to be proven right, so we're okay. Go search. Go check what we say.
If you have questions, please ask us.
Yeah.
If you think I'm full of crap on something, tell us. We're glad to discuss anything, and we invite you to
Yep.
Interact with us. So.
Yep. Leave a comment, leave a question or a comment for Uncle Mark. We're still putting together a Q&A episode for him. And we want to add more. So if you have a question for Uncle Mark, please leave a comment.
Yeah, sure.
Leave it on Rumble, leave it on Facebook, leave it wherever you want, and we'll get the question to him. So for his Q&A episode that we'll have probably coming up after September, because I'm probably taking a few weeks off after Labor Day.
Yeah.
It's time for a rest.
Yeah,
I'm
been at it. Yeah.
I'm a one-person show. I have my great guests. There's the guests that come on do great. They do their own research. Of course, I do research also, but I'm the one that does all the production and the posting and the social media. So after Labor Day, I'm probably taking a short break, 2 or 3 weeks off, so that I can actually do some work. Is actually what I need. I'm not even taking off really. What I'm doing is I'm taking 2 or 3 weeks to put together the podcast's clip show that I want to do. I want to take clips from episodes and have them on their own channel. So I'm going to be doing work. I'm not even really going to be taking a vacation. It's just I don't have enough time to do it with continuing episodes.
I do those type of vacations too.
Yeah, it's not even going to be a vacation.
Yeah, I have to go back to work to rest up.
But yeah, we will have Uncle Mark's Q&A. If we can have it before Labor Day, then we will try and get that in. But if not, it'll be after my small break after Labor Day. Leave a question, comment for us, of course. Please share it out. That's how we're going to get more people. You sharing these episodes is how we're going to reach more fans and continue to grow the podcast. So please share an episode when you're watching it. If you enjoyed it, take the 10 seconds and share the episode. I know in today's day and age that 10 seconds is a lot to ask of somebody. Just take 10 seconds, hit the share button. It's not that hard, and share it. That will help us a lot. That would help us a lot. So please, if you enjoy the podcast, please share it out. Visit our storefront, bonfire.com/store/The Boiling Point Podcast. That's all in lowercase. Make sure you type that all in lowercase. It's case sensitive, all in lowercase. Bonfire.com/store/The Boiling Point Podcast. That's our storefront. Marcus Fredrickson is going to play us out. Go check out his music, Reverb Nation /Marcus Fredrickson. You can also, of course, check the description of the videos. They have all the links of everything that I'm talking about and I give to you on the shows, as well as Uncle Mark. If you wanted to reach out to him, he restores artifacts. If you have an artifact that needs restored, reach out to him. Restore it at ymail.com. That's how you can get a hold of Uncle Mark, or if you really want to ask him a direct question. But I prefer if you stick with comments, leave your questions in the comments so as not to bombard his email account, his business email account, with a bunch of fan questions. And anything else?
That's it. That about wraps it up.
Yep, that's about wraps it up.
So.
If you haven't seen the episodes that we referenced many times in this, please check out our Facebook, facebook.com/The Boiling Point Podcast. You can follow me personally on Instagram, JDEDESIGNz. That's with a Z. I will be sharing all of Uncle Mark's episodes that we referenced in this podcast before this podcast actually comes out. So if you missed those episodes, check out our social media, and you can find them there. For episode 56, I am your host, JD. This is my senior unexplained phenomena correspondent, Uncle Mark, and that is the end.
Good night.
Love is strong, it lasts so long, it just goes on for eternity. And now you've won through your son, the greatest gift, so did we.